hope my team they won, yeah, man. I hope my team they won, yeah. I hope my team they won, yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Michael Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, boy. You gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that swag, that MEAC, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay. Tune into the HBCU Sports Lab with Dr. Bill, Mike and Charles, and I'm time, yeah.
This is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. How y'all doing today?
How you doing, Doc?
I'm doing well. So as you see, we continue to do our part of the social distancing and making sure that everybody can get in here and get our HBCU Sports Report. We'll be going back to 12:30 a.m. shortly as we try to get that up to date as well. But with that, I hope everybody's doing as well as possible with the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has changed a lot of aspects of the world. Obviously, you all on Facebook, you can see me, you can hear the gentleman Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. I can see them because I have them in blue jeans, so you'll start seeing us set up shortly where we'll be able to see everybody back on their panoramic screens to show the world. But that's our next step. But with that, we'll get going with the news of the day. But before that, Mike, how you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Doing well. I see you with your Emmitt Smith jersey in the back. I see you with your tight shirt on. Are you doing all right? You must be working out, man. You looking good.
No, I've been working, period. I think, man, I think I work more at home than I do when I'm going to either the offices. I know that's true.
And I hear Charles back there giggling, talking about, I know that's the truth. How you doing, Charles, Mr. Bishop?
I'm doing well. You know, as well as you can be during this difficult time, but keeping the spirits up.
Certainly, no doubt. That's a good thing to hear. This is Dr. Cavil inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. As we started just a little bit late, we won't get into the introduction. Everybody knows us by now that's following us, and we'll give you a little more of that maybe later at the end of the show. But with that said, as we get to it, Charles, you want to start out with some news of the day?
Sure, let's start off with Box Row. They released their annual HBCU Division I All-America Teams and All-America Honors. And Hampton guard Jermaine Marl, he's been named the Box Row Division I National Player of the Year for the second year in a row. Marl is a senior from Newport News, finished fourth in Division I scoring, averaging 24.8 points per game and 11 assists per game. He was the only player in Division I in the top 15 in both categories. Marl led the Pirates to a fifth place finish in the Big South Conference and becomes the first player to repeat as the winner of in the awards history. And North Carolina A&T's acting head coach Will Jones and Tennessee State's head coach Brian P. Collins, they took home the Box Row Coaches of the Year. So kudos to both of those men. So let me name out the first team All-Americans. That would have been Jermaine Marl, of course, from Hampton. Also Jabri Blunt from North Carolina Central. Ben Stanley from Hampton. Cameron Langley from North Carolina A&T. Devontae Patterson from Prairie View A&M. Ronald Jackson from North Carolina A&T. And Quatrell Pope from Bethune-Cookman. They were the first team All-Americans, along with Gerard Andrews from Prairie View A&M.
Man, some top list on there. I think you have to say kudos tomorrow in regards to being back-to-back Player of the Year, and no doubt he certainly well deserved of it. Mike, what are your thoughts on that? Anybody else you'd like to jump in there and say maybe could have earned their player of the year? Or do you
No, I think that's a solid list. I think if you look at for overall body of work during the course of the year, I think you had, pretty much the creme de la crop in the league. So Patterson is the one standout to me who was a beast. He didn't lead the league in scoring, but his points on rebounds and across the board, I think he was third or fourth in the league in scoring, and then tops in rebounding. So I think it's a solid list.
No doubt about it. Charles, any other news you got up for the day?
Yeah, not only do we have the men's box to roll annual All-American list, but we also have the women's box to roll.
Chivalry is not dead.
Chivalry is not dead. So let me make sure I make that announcement. Box to roll. The 2020 Division I women's basketball season, Norfolk State guard Shanette Hicks was named the Box Roll National Player of the Year. Shanette led the MEAC and was 12th in Division I in scoring, averaging 20 points per game. She was second in Division I in steals, averaging almost a whopping 5 steals per game. She led the conference in assists with 5, and she was 8th in field goal percentage, shooting 47% from the field with 4.5 rebounds. She recorded a triple-double against Virginia Lynchburg back in November, scoring 31 points, 14 assists, and 11 steals. The Virginia Tech transfer returned home to Norfolk to lead the Lady Spartans to second place finish in the MEAC, and Bethune-Cookman's head coach Vanessa Blair-Lewis was named the Box to Roll Coach of the Year. So kudos to Vanessa Blair-Lewis. Let me make sure I name those first team All-Americans: Ashley Bates from Hampton, Siani Pryor from Texas Southern, Shanette Hicks from Norfolk State, Dariana Lewis from Alabama A&M, Chelsea Mitchell from Morgan State, Nia Mitchell from Texas Southern, Paulina Afridi from North Carolina Central, and Amisha Williams from Jackson State. So those are your first team All-Americans from Box to Row.
Nice update. Any comments on that, Mike?
Sienna Cryer from Texas Southern, first in the conference and fourth in the nation in assists with 6.5 a game. Was first in the conference and fourth in the nation with steals as well. So she had a tremendous year. I thought maybe the coach you would go for Tamika Reed with Jackson State. She got the Lady Tigers to an overall 18-10, a conference record of 16-2. JSU had a 13-game win streak, so I thought maybe she may have been mentioned as a coach, but I can't go wrong with the decision there.
Certainly understand that. It's my understanding that the women's basketball coach at Cavil State has been let go and relieved of his duties. Also, I'm sure you got notification right here back in the SWAC. You have the men's coach over at Alabama State has resigned. Boy, I tell you, long time all conference player of the year when he played in the SWAC, Coach Lewis Jackson. Couple of SWAC championships, tournament championships, but he's resigned, and it looks like he's going to stay with the university in a different capacity, whether in athletics or overall academics is still to be announced, but it is my understanding that he is staying with the university. What is your thoughts, Mike, in regards to Lewis Jackson resigning from his men's head basketball post at Alabama State?
Again, I guess a couple of things. Number one, timing. I wonder if it was a mutual decision, because I think you alluded to he's staying on. I guess I don't mean to laugh. I mean, be funny, but this COVID-19 is not impacting the coaching carousel in the college basketball ranks. That's for sure.
That's for sure.
If you look at what's happened over the past week. But I do wonder, scratch my head, number one, with his timing, was it crucial to do it this time? What was the negotiation of the position part of the, him stepping down? I'd like to know more of the dynamics. So, but again, it's the coaching, it's the environment we live in, but I do scratch my head at that move and the timing as well.
Yeah, I'm still really curious about the timing of this, and I obviously see at this point in the business you just move forward. Charles, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think in the business you move forward, and like you said, Mike, you mentioned the timing of it. You kind of question the timing, but it looks like he'll be moving within the university, within another capacity within the university. But what is the famous line from The Godfather 2? This is the business that they have chosen. So this is basically
Mike, hold on, Charles. We're not gonna let you just slide that line in there like we didn't catch that. Mike, did you hear that?
I had another Godfather quote I was about to throw in there too. So.
Go ahead, Mike. Since we just throwing them in there, go ahead. Make my day.
The swag is taking care of family business.
Oh man.
That was now Michael Corleone said we take care of family business.
Wow. Only on Dr. Ville's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, when you start getting closer to the day when you're talking about coaches and the movement of HBCU athletic programs. With that said, let's transition over. But before that, I certainly would like to give Mike a chance to see if there's any news of the day that he'd like to provide.
Yeah, and just a couple of small tidbits.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this may be a week old, but I thought it was very interesting. With the season, canceled abruptly from high school to the pros, many athletes are kind of wondering what's going to happen. Well, 3 Purdue football players, Lanya Tucker, running back, tight end Jordan Jones, and quarterback Jalen Morton had all received invites to the first ever NFL HBCU Combine, which is now, as we know, canceled like a lot of events. And the 2 of the players are very hopeful, but I thought that was interesting that the NFL, I read further, is committed to having this event next year, but this would have been the first annual event, and you had 3 of, I think, 45, maybe 50 players from the HBCU ranks from Purdue A&M.
Certainly, that's a great point. And it's interesting that the update by the NFL said that they are committed to moving forward with this program, although this one is canceled. What are your thoughts in terms of that updated part of the news, Charles?
Well, I think undoubtedly with it being canceled, you err on the side of safety. You hope that the athletes get an opportunity to showcase their talents once again, and it sounds as though the NFL is committed to for that to happen. So, unfortunately, with the public safety concerns, you have to err on the side of caution. So, I'm hopeful that these athletes get an opportunity once again, in whatever the time period is, to give them an opportunity to show their talent, showcase their talent.
No doubt about it. Let me give you an update for see if, Mike, you have any other news that you want to do. I'm sitting in the office room space here, and I've set up now where I have on my left side, I have my Gold Panthers, Prairie View, Rally Tile, along with my books, because, I've started recommitting to writing the book that I was approved to publish in regards to 100-year history of the SWAC. So I have my reference books here, to name a few of them: Black Man in the Huddle, Breaking the Line, Sportsman-like Conduct, Stamped from the Beginning, Benching Jim Crow, Thursday Night Lights. Just to name you a few of the books here that I'm referencing. I always want to throw in the recent one where we interviewed the author there, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, in regards to Jake Gaither and the Florida A&M Rattlers. So your boy's putting in a little work. I also have my textbook that I use for my class in terms of Chapter 2 in there. Charles would be familiar with this. He has taken this class as he's finished the master's program at Texas Southern University. We have that book over here on the side. So that's the viewpoint that people are getting when they're looking at me hosting the show and listening to you all. So just wanted to give you a little bit of pageantry so your guys can see what this looked like on Facebook Live as we continue to give the people what they want and what they need. Mike, any additional news that you want to give us?
No, you had me at pageantry and you put in some work over there. Throwing in them little 50-cent words. Mike. No, I'm kidding.
No, you're good. But you're going to get so far home with the stakes, man, you're going to be in trouble.
I know. The one other thing and this is fresh.
If we ever get back to having some tailgate this fall.
I know, right? We're going to have one massive tailgate once this thing subsides.
I love it. Go ahead, Mike.
I got this across the Twitterverse, and it was also on, I got to give HBCU Game Day. The LA Rams hire former Hampton QB in their front office. So it looks like Darian Williamson has been hired as the NFL franchise as a player engagement fellow. If you listen to the description of the position, I knew it existed. I just didn't know it was called that name, player engagement fellow. So he will assist with the programs that support rookies transition mentally, physically, and financially as they adjust to life in the NFL. He will also help provide resources and programs for current athletes to set them up for success on and off the field and focus on the personal and professional growth of the NFL. Sounds like a stand-up program. I knew it existed. I just didn't know it by that name until I started reading through it and started going through Twitterverse. Player Engagement Fellow.
Man, that's pretty awesome. Glad you shared that news. Didn't catch that one, Mike. You snuck that in there. That's pretty good. And along the lines, before I go back to Charles to see if there's any additional news that he wanted to share, now that you bring up the Los Angeles Rams, you had the little tit for tat with Eric Dickerson, the Hall of Famer. I'm sure everybody's familiar with, the running back from SMU in terms of his college days, the Pony Express as they like to call it. In regards to that program that got shut down as well, that just finally has kind of made it back. He is the president of this Ram fan club, if you would, and so they had this discrepancy over two different emblems that they were going to use for this. One of them happened to be a carbon copy, and Charles, really, right? Carbon copy of one of our HBCUs, Winston-Salem State, including the W on the side of the face that clearly shows that this is the same logo. They just changed the colors from red and black to, I guess, yellow and blue in terms of the Rams. So they got a lot of talk of the town, including over there with Gaither, our friend Steve Gaither, who is a Winston-Salem State alum. So you can imagine that he made sure that he put that information out on his site, HBCU Game Day, a great site for information on HBCU sports. So check that out. Shout out to Steve Gaither. Charles, any thoughts in terms of that?
One follow-up real quick. Kudos to the Rams, because the part that I left out is last month they hired former Winston State star quarterback Corey Woodbury as assistant coach. So they are, at least stepping up a little bit and bringing HBCU players into their front office.
No doubt about it. Still doesn't cover for this, but you do have to give him a much shout out. And I remember watching Corey Woodbury back in the day in regards to when he was playing Virginia Union, I believe it was, against that game in the Pioneer Bowl against Tuskegee University. Charles, any thoughts on the logos or the Rams scene to make sure that they provide opportunities for HBCU grads in their office?
Well, kudos to the LA Rams for providing those opportunities to our former HBCU athletes. They're like a modern-day Kansas City Chiefs, because you remember back in the day, the Kansas City Chiefs, they were the first to bite at the apple in terms of getting those HBCU players in the AFL. Of course, with the AFL overall, in terms of bringing HBCU players. But going back to the logo, one thing that the Rams weren't, they weren't subtle about taking Winston-Salem State's mascot.
that was pretty good. That was pretty good,
if it ain't broke, don't. If it ain't broke, steal it. Hey, I'll take that. Yeah, they demoed the logo.
Oh my goodness, that is hilarious. Any other news you got, Charles? Let's see if we get these guys back in here. Well, we're having a little technical difficulty in terms of the internet version of this, but we'll get him back in. Charles, we got you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we just had a little bit of the internet stirring around. So, any other additional updates you have?
Yeah, just to mention about the NCAA Division I Council extending the eligibility for student athletes impacted by COVID-19. So basically, this article is on HBCU Sports website. Kim Rashad, Division I Council, on Monday voted to allow schools to provide spring sports student athletes an additional season of competition and an extension of their period of eligibility. Yep.
No doubt about it. Mike, let's get into that a little more. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's the right move to make. I wonder how you're going to smash through the details. Number one, they can't offer any additional aid, from what I understand. Then the other question is, how do you mesh that with incoming freshmen? How we're going to balance all of that?
Well, the one thing that I do want to update is my understanding they will actually be able to add the aid, and in fact, the NCAA says that schools can use, there's a fund that the NCAA provides, usually it's for students if they have different incidents they need to take care of. For example, if they need problems with their tooth, they have to go see a dentist, they can use out of this special fund. It's almost like a meaty fund, they can use that. Well, they told the schools that they could use money out of that fund to make sure that the seniors actually get their year back if they need it. So those are some of the things that I've heard in terms of that I think are fascinating. But one thing that I also think is important that you have to consider when you're talking about this format in regards to that is the fact that also how are you going to deal with the roster spots in trying to create the team framework as you did, as you're setting up for these students coming back. So they'll allow them to expand the rosters for that 1 year, but you'll have now essentially 5 classes that'll take place. You'll have fifth year seniors, for lack of better words. You'll have the true seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen that are coming in terms of that class. So in a lot of ways it's going to be like those students that had the extra fifth year from the graduate status, but the fact is that you won't have to worry about your roster size. So they limited the roster size of baseball, which is the only sport that has a lock on the roster size for the spring, but they opened it up. So for baseball, all other sports get theirs back, but you will be able to have that aid. What are your thoughts on that, Charles, in regards to how this might play out?
Well, I look at it from a competition standpoint with the expansion of the roster. And this is something that we've talked about, especially with regards to baseball, but the pitching depth in terms of benefit of lower Division I teams. To me, that's a very good point. The pitching depth, you'll be able to bring in a lot more pitching depth. That is one perspective I did not. I got to hats off to you on that. It's a very good point.
No doubt about it. And also, financially, how challenging do you think this will be for HBCUs just in terms of them paying for these extra scholarships? Obviously, we're concentrating a lot more on baseball because it has the scholarship limits that have been updated, but now you're talking about your spring sports of track and field, both on the men's and women's side. You're talking about softball as well. How do you think that's going to affect HBCUs and being able to finance this, even if they can use those funds from, for lack of a better word, the NCAA needy fund?
I guess my perspective is I think it's going to challenge the HBCU and admins and coaching staff to be a little bit more creative. You're going to have expanded roster. Is there a certain status? Are there loopholes where you can have some of those seniors there, and maybe it doesn't count against your roster status or your scholarship status? And are there creative ways to still get them aid without really robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak? So I think it's going to challenge schools to become a lot more creative, because it's one thing to say, yeah, we're going to grant them another year of eligibility, but, you know, you still have folks coming in, folks coming back. You know, you're going to have chip over. How creative are you at kind of balancing that financial load with some of them? Surely, you know, I don't know as much about academia or the athletic funding piece, but surely there's some creative ways where you can find ways to bring some of those seniors back and give them some aid without losing some of your incoming freshmen. Maybe put them under, as, you know, red shirts for part of the year. But I think they're going to have to use a system of balance and creation, a balance and creativity to kind of manage that process. I don't think it's going to be as easy as us just stating we're going to give you 1 year of eligibility.
No doubt about it. Charles, your thoughts?
Dr. Gill, this is where they earn that title, that Vice President of Intercollegiate Athletics, because I think Mike hit the nail on the head in terms of creativity, and you're going to have to kind of not only be creative, but kind of surround yourself with people who really understand the balance between the academic side and trying to add these extra scholarships. How does it all play out? So, you know, I got to take my hat off those who show the most creativity in terms of making this happen.
No doubt about it. I think that's another great point. Want to kind of transition. Let's stay with the NCAA, but transition in regards to the other NCAA announcement, which is in regards to NCAA slashing the financial payout to its institutions. I believe they slashed the $360-some thousand in regards to the payout. Let me start with you, Charles. What are your thoughts in terms of, again, how this is going to affect HBCU programs when we talk about HBCU programs in a lot of ways really wanting to take advantage of utilizing this money that comes from the NCAA annually? Go ahead, Charles.
Well, I mean, when I read that article, you know, my thinking went into political mode. Like, I wonder, is there a stimulus package to give to the NCAA to make up for that money that obviously will be missing, because there's, you know, the boulder rolls downhill. So I think, you know, Mike talked about creativity. You talk about not having a pool of money that was once available to you. So this is going to be a phenomenal case study in terms of trying to understand what do HBCUs do in terms of trying to recoup the lost funds, or how do you operate without that pool of money being there?
Exactly. You hit it on the point. Mike, give me a little more insight to your perspective in regards to, as Charles said, trying to find some stimulus package.
Well, yeah, and to build on what CD was talking about, you know, you got some conferences that can maybe withstand the blow. Maybe their reserves are a little different, and then you have other conferences who are not built to withstand that. Their roots are not that deep. Their reserves are not there. So how do they weather this storm? How do they? And again, they're going to have to get very creative. They're going to have to take it on the chin, at least partially, for the upcoming season, because they don't have a lot of those reserves in stock that you hear maybe the SEC has, or the Big 12 has, or the ACC has. Unfortunately, I don't see the HBCU conferences as having that kind of reserve, unless you tell me something different. The other piece is, what about D2 and D3? I mean, if I recall, D2 members receive 4.34% of the actual revenues, and D3 even less, 3%. So they're going to take it on the chin. So the Big Five, they'll be okay. They'll survive this. But HBCUs, boy, that Pandora's box of creativity has to be, we don't need some magicians in the SWAC and in the MEAC.
Hey, if I'm one of the Power 5 schools, I'm not trying to use any of my reserves. I want my stimulus money. I want whatever y'all have thought of. I want it. I don't want to use my reserves.
You almost wish they did like the stimulus package, because if you have so much and this much over revenue, then you don't get as much. That way it kind of balances between the haves and the have-nots. But that's not the approach here.
Yeah,
right.
As you talked about, Mike, I'm taking my information from ESPN.com in regards to that $375 million that was slashed from the distribution of Division I school funds. And as you alluded to, particularly I thought was interesting when you talk about that breakdown. According to the NCAA, Division II members receive 4.3% of actual revenues, currently projected to be about $13.9 million. Which is $30 million less than last year. Division III will receive 3.18% of the actual revenues, about $10.7 million, which is about $22 million less than last year. So for those HBCUs at the Division II level, you can actually see the money in regards to that. When you go back a little further to break down these numbers that were provided, you get information that talks about during teleconference reporters on Thursday, as Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlesby said that the smaller distribution from the NCAA would cost the league about $14 million. He's expected the league to receive about $10 million from the NCAA instead of anticipated $24 million. Again, this is coming from ESPN and their updates in regards to that. So that's a lot of the money. But the NCAA started out by saying that $50 million will come from its reserves. So they're pulling money from their reserves to pay for the money that they are going to pay. So that's scary. And that it is also has about $270 million in event cancellation insurance policies, which will use to pay off a line of credit to cover the remaining distribution within 12 months. So it looks like they are going to try to pay the remaining distribution. You just won't get it right away. You might not get it in terms of almost a full year. So that means you're going to have to be offsetting this money for over the next 6, 9, 12 months. Now, obviously, all this is in the case, and there's questions as things continue to push back, because we're going to get into another conversation in regards to this virtual meeting with players that you're starting to hear first from the SEC and then Big 12 picked on that, so we can kind of put all that together in regards to some news and how these things are going to affect HBCU. But after I broke down some of those numbers, Charles, I know this may not change your feeling, but in particular, when you start hearing these numbers thrown around, what other additional thoughts do you have in regards to this?
Well, I don't know when the next television contracts are coming up, but I think they're going to get that money back from whatever network wants to televise their product. That money is going to come back to the NCAA in some manner.
I like the way you think. I always have. That's why I'll say it on record. You ended up with A's out of all my classes, and I was trying to find a way to put an F squared in your life just so people wouldn't say that, oh man, this shit. But I was like, man, this dude is going in. So another great point, huh?
Oh, please. You know he just bought you some steak or something.
Mike, this is live on Facebook, man.
So give me a steak. You know I got you on that
Oh man,
I do have one. I do have one more.
Right.
I do have one more question and statement, and this may be unrelated, but related. From a business standpoint, from the NBA standpoint, you know, in business, you have insurance on loss of revenue for instances you can't control, force majeure. So,
right.
You know, in force majeure, yeah, if you can't control it, you have an insurance policy. The NCAA has that.
You did go to law school, didn't you, Mike? Ah, okay.
I say what?
I said you did go to law school, didn't you, Mike?
Yes.
Snuck that in there.
Do we have such a policy or such a clause in either the SWAC or the MEAC or any HBCU conference? Because I would venture to say that this is not the first time that this type of experience, our world changing, will come up, and our business, our revenue is impacted. I don't know that answer to that question, but this situation here has me thinking, do we have a clause to protect us in that instant?
Hey, that's a very good point, Mike, about force majeure. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that was my whole law school kicking in too. So,
this law class, man, y'all acting up today. Educated brothers. Now, let's shift over, moving a little further into this in terms of what we starting to see on the field, or at least on the screen, in regards to the SEC allowing virtual meetings, and quickly the Big 12 joined suit and allowed virtual meetings as well. How do you think this will trickle down in regards to the SWAC? I've heard that they've started using maybe some of these blue jeans, things that we're using now for our virtual meeting as well. But what are your thoughts in terms of now this may be accelerating as you see it publicly coming out that the SEC is allowing virtual meeting with players as well as the Big 12?
well, I think it's a good thing in terms of especially with regards to HBCUs using the technology available, so that no one is at a competitive disadvantage. I've read about some things that Jackson State is doing in terms of meeting with their players via the various social media platforms where they all can talk and kind of learn concepts as though they would have been in spring practice. So I think for veteran teams, if we get an opportunity to play in the fall, I don't think there'll be too much drop off. But if you're installing a system, or if you're bringing in new coaches around the spring, I think you might see where that could have some effect.
No doubt about it. Mike, did you want to follow up and jump in on this virtual meeting?
Yeah. I guess as I was reading the article, I had some degree of confusion at some of the guidelines that are imposed on it. I think it's a good idea. I think SEC really started it, and a lot of other conferences will follow. That is a no-brainer. What I don't understand is under the new guidelines, staff members will not be allowed to remotely watch, direct, or review workouts. But virtual film review, chalk talks, and anything else that doesn't involve physical activity will be permissible. I don't know, what's the problem. I think we're in unprecedented times and uncharted waters. And I think this is one of those times that you relax that and allow as much engagement as possible. So I guess that's my small degree of criticism to that. There's a good
very much so.
Yeah, there's a good chance that this will go into early summer. So what's wrong with allowing coaches to look at the players' workouts as well? Coaches are not allowed to do that, but, you can have chalk talk, allow more engagement as much as possible.
Yeah, I think part of what may have taken place there is I think you make a good point, but I think what they're trying to get away from is actually making sure that coaches do not force players to come together, which would be obviously opposite of what they were trying to prevent with the social distancing. So they're saying that you can put all these players on virtual television, meaning that they can have their independent, like we're doing here, with people at their independent locations, and thus far you can go over plays, talk about how you want them to work out. But I think they want to be very careful that coaches do not try to get quote-unquote slick and then ask players, a group of players, the offensive line per se, to come together and run these kind of drills together so they can coach them up. And therefore, you're getting away with the social distancing. The whole reason they said that you can't do anything, and so they relaxed the rules to say that you're saying can do some things, but they're trying to prevent people maybe going a little too far. Any thoughts on that, Mike? Is that maybe what they were trying to look for?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I pushed back a little bit on it, Doc.
Go ahead.
Because
that.
I think I agree with trying to not promote, the 6-foot protocol and promote social distancing. Still at the same time, you can have individuals on different split screens doing workouts, and at least a coach observing the players' workouts and providing guidance on their workouts. The way I read this is coaches are not allowed to observe the activity, be it in person or virtually. So that's whether there's 2, 3 of them or one of them. I think to me that's the relaxation. I think you gotta let up off of that a little bit.
So you gotta let a coach be a coach.
Right.
Charles, what are your thoughts?
Let a coach do his or her thing.
What are your thoughts on that, Charles? Which side of the fence do you sit on?
I think Mike was right on top of it on that in terms of allowing a coach to be a coach. You do want to promote the social distancing aspect, but if a coach is able to monitor, the workouts and offer whatever tidbits from a virtual standpoint, I don't see the issue whatsoever with that. But I think sometimes you can over-police things. So hopefully this isn't one of those deals that you kind of over-police, but, people will find a way to get around whatever. So, you just, you kind of nod your head and kind of wink like, well, okay, I get it. Yeah, exactly.
Boy, I tell you guys get a little too much into this. Before we get in that, back to a little more serious note. The SEC has canceled its spring meetings because of the coronavirus. That was to be expected, but now it's official. And obviously, as you saw, the Big 12 join in with the virtual and how that will trickle down. I'm sure now we see the fact that probably these conferences will start canceling their spring meetings. But I'm surprised in some ways that since they're talking about this virtual, they did for the coaches to be able to talk to players, I'm surprised maybe the ACC didn't look at doing virtual meetings for the spring meetings. What side do you see things playing out in regards to conferences, and particularly the MEAC, SWAC, CIAA, and SIAC, Gulf Coast Athletic Conference, HBCU conferences? Do you think they'll go the way where they'll cancel the spring meetings, or do you think they'll do virtual or teleconference spring meetings? Charles, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think right now, if there is a way to teleconference or to do whatever virtual meetings, that is the way to go. Obviously, you're not going to have an opportunity to meet, but I don't know if there's an issue with regards to maybe the sensitivity of the information that's being provided as to why they made a decision to not hold a spring meeting from a virtual standpoint. So maybe that might have something to do with it.
Certainly. Let me give you a quote out of here before I pass it to Mike, and then I'll come back to you, Charles, to give you a chance to provide some additional thoughts. Quote, again, this is ESPN. Quote, the SEC spring meetings represents one of our conference's great traditions and provides an opportunity to celebrate the past year, plan for the future, and focus on our mission to serve people through our university. That was by SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. He also said, we regret that this year's event will not be held as planned, but we know cancellation is appropriate in the light of supporting safety, well-being during the unprecedented health crisis. So that's the line he put on here. Final thing he said, we are currently exploring ways to conduct as many of the planned meetings in an alternate format and time. Sankey said, we will be intentional to celebrate all the remarkable individuals who would otherwise have been honored at our annual SEC Awards dinner. So it looks as if they also do a dinner. So it's probably more of the dinner capacity that they canceled, but it looks like they'll try to do the virtual, which you suggested, Charles, should move forward. Mike, with a little more quotes on this and thought process, where are you going with this now?
Yeah, I do agree with they'll probably go forward with, or it makes sense to do this, to cancel the face-to-face spring meetings, given all that's happened. It looks like, to me, it makes sense to have a smaller version of it. I think, me looking in, I get the sense that there's an inability to capture what is normally a part of these spring meetings. You got to realize, you mentioned they have banquets, they have engagement, so there's plenty of engagement. There's plenty of parading of potential players who may factor in big. You're taking all of those elements out of it by canceling this meeting, and I think the conferences were challenged of, do we just scrap it, or do we have a smaller version of it, in the light of all of this COVID-19 spread. I think they were challenged, and I don't think they had a plan going in. So I think they will have it. It'll be a smaller version. It'll be a virtual version of itself, but you won't have press there. That's usually a big deal for the press as much as it is for the conference. So it'll be difficult to capture all of those elements. So I think it's a challenge not only for the SEC but for the other conferences. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better, Mike.
With that, let's jump forward on a lighter note. I was part of this team put together by BCSN, as BCSN has the sports wrap with Brian and AD. They brought me in to look at formulating the 2020 BCSN Men's Fantasy Basketball Tournament. So I got a chance to send you all to get a little head look at this before it went out publicly, and wanted to talk to you all about your opinions in regards to breaking this down. What were your sheets, and let's get all the way to the Final Four, and then we can hold off to see where we go with the last four teams. But as I do this, I'll put a picture up there for those that may have not seen it, and I'll send it out in regards to this. But this was a breakdown of Macy's index that ranks teams. Now, the challenge, as you would imagine, in terms of ranking teams is the different divisional classifications. Obviously, you have NCAA Division I, where you have the HBCU programs out of the MEAC and the SWAC, with the additional program as Tennessee State and Hampton, that we refer to as independent programs that are in the OVC and Big South respectively. Then you have NCAA Division II programs out of the CIAA, SIAC, and other independent programs that are in different conferences such as West Virginia State University, to name one. Then obviously the NAIA programs that are in the conference of GCAC, Gulf Coast Athletic Conference, as well as the independent HBCU programs in conferences such as the Red River Athletic Conference, with programs such as Wiley College, Texas College, Houston Tillotson, to name a few, and then Langston out of the Sooner Athletic Conference, as well as Edward Waters, who's still an NAIA member that's moving in Division II. But these were programs that were all eligible, that you broke down in terms of their championship. And man, Charles, make it sound like I'm boring here. with the breakdown in regards to that Macy rankings, also the conference championship, and things of that nature. Well, when you break down the 32 teams, we name the regions after famous coaches: Clarence Big House Gaines, Jerry Johnson, Bing Job, and John McClendon. And the number one team out of these four regions, top 32 teams were Prairie View, which was in the Clarence Big House Games, North Carolina Central out of the Jerry Johnson's region, and Southern in the Big Joe region, as well as North Carolina A&T out of the John McClendon. Before I break down some more of the teams, what were your thoughts on those four teams as the number one seeds? I'll start with Charles, as I mess with him a little bit in terms of his long day as he's getting beat up. And Mike talking about all the work he's doing. I guess y'all tired folks, but I tell you, y'all better go to bed and get some rest. Charles, what are your thoughts in terms of these number one seeds? Do you agree with them? Did you disagree with them? Should somebody else have jumped in there?
I heard Prairie View. I heard North Carolina Central. Did I hear Southern?
Yes, Southern was the number one seed, as well as North Carolina A&T.
Now, taking nothing away from Southern, because I think they were one of the hotter teams coming down the stretch, but number one seed, they got 2 losses sitting on them from Jackson State. So I'm just saying.
So, who would you? Let's do it like this, because I think you can make a valid point. If you drop Southern out of the number one seed out of that Big Joe region that they were in, who would you have put as a number one seed? What other teams do you think qualify that you would replace Southern with?
Who would have been in that Ben Joe region? Because Hampton, to me, would definitely qualify as being a number one seed for me.
Yeah, so when you talk about that Ben Joe region, the number 2 seed was Hampton. So would you push Hampton to that number 1 seed and slide Southern to a number 2 seed if you're going to keep them in that same region?
Yeah.
Is that what you would look at?
I probably would have bumped up Hampton to be the number 1 seed in that region.
Ooh, now it's getting fun. It's getting interesting. Mike, in terms, and we'll come back to you to see how you think Charles with that 4th number 1 seed in North Carolina A&T, the lowest seed, if you would. But while he's doing that, let me jump in there and ask Mike in regards to, you agree with Southern coming down from the number 1 seed to number 2 seed? Again, the top 4 seeds were Prairie View A&M, the overall number 1 seed. The second overall number seed was North Carolina Central. Third was Southern. Fourth was North Carolina A&T. Any thoughts for you in regards to those top 4 seeds? Are you aligned with Charles in terms of moving Southern, or do you bump North Carolina A&T for that fact?
That's an interesting thought. I guess I lean toward bumping Southern.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure who. It could, you could make an argument for 2 or 3 teams, I guess, in that book. But I would say, Southern had a couple of losses. They did finish the season strong, but I don't know if I'd have them as a number 1 seed.
Well, let me tease y'all with this a little bit. Charles Swift Hampton. There was some conversation with some of the Division II schools, such as Virginia State, as obviously they won the regular season in the North, the tougher part of the CIAA. They finished near the final part of the tournament, didn't get it done as Winston-Salem State held up the trophy against Fayetteville State. But then you have Miles College in regards to winning the West Division of the SIAC and then getting the crown. Obviously, you don't talk about but 1 year. They were back-to-back champions. And then Xavier, they got it done in the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference at the NAIA level. If you're thinking about maybe one NAIA team in regards to that, them doing the double dip in terms of winning the regular season and the tournament. Obviously, the Division I programs outside of Hampton did not get a chance to play in the tournament. Hampton did. In fact, they made it all the way to the championship game of the Big South and lost. You had Tennessee State also playing the OVC that played their tournament a week early. So they got into the quarterfinals, winning the opening round game and then losing in the quarterfinals. So with those teams, any thoughts of Virginia State Miles College, Xavier sneaking up and maybe taking that lead from
Absolutely.
Wow.
If that is a condition of the bracket, I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to really give the bracket a lot of detailed look. But at that, I got to go with Charles, maybe Hampton, just because of their performance and at least through part of the tournament. But also, you got Miles, second season. This program nationally recognized, number 19 in the Division II rankings, 13-game winning streak. Miles makes a good argument for a viable number 1 seed.
All right, well, let's get into it a little more. Breaking down, like you said, we'll go to the Sweet 16 and stop it there and before we play it out, because the fans are going to vote in regards to whether they agree with the Final Four that we came out with each of the individuals, which was, again, AD and Brian, as you talked to BCN Sports Lab with Brian and AD, BCN. Starting with that Clarence Big House game region, you had Prairie View as the number 1 overall seed. They match up against number 8 Dillard out of the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. You have Fayetteville State at a 4 seed, Jackson State at a 5 seed, Bowie State as a 6 seed versus Virginia State. The only game out of the tournament where you see a CIAA matchup in the opening round game. And then you have the number 2 seed, Norfolk State against Talladega. Let me go back to Charles in terms of those first round matchups in terms of the round of 32. What are your thoughts of Prairie View versus Dillard? Who do you got coming out of that?
Prairie View.
Fayetteville State and Jackson State, 4 versus 5. Who you come out of there?
Jackson State.
6 versus 3. CIAA matchup, Bowie State, Virginia State.
Bowie State, Virginia State, that's a little tougher one to me, and I'm probably going to lean towards Virginia State on that one.
No problem. He got a little pause into him finally. The other ones he rolled off so quick, I was like, ooh. And the 2 versus 7, Norfolk State, Talladega. Talladega have any chance against the number 2 seed, Norfolk State, Charles?
I don't think so, and I have to give kudos to Jimmy in terms of I don't think we can undersell the athleticism of the guys on the Division I level in terms of taking on the Division II teams. I think it's a different caliber athlete, and I'm going to tend to go in the direction of the Division I athlete.
Certainly, I think you make great points there when you talk about those matchups. With that, Charles has Prairie View over Dillard. He has Jackson State over Fayetteville State. Slight upset, 5 over 4. So he has 1 versus 5 in the Sweet 16 of the Clarence Big House game. With Bowie State, Virginia State, he has number 3 over Bowie State, and Norfolk State getting it done easily over Talladega. Set number 2-3 matchup in that Sweet 16. Mike, what are your thoughts on number 1 versus 8, Prairie View Dillard?
Prairie View.
Fayetteville State and Jackson State, 4-5.
Jackson State.
3 versus the 6, Bowie State, Virginia State. Virginia State is the 3.
I would actually go with Bowie State on that one.
A little different in the mix. Slight upset. First upset I see. 2 versus the 7, Norfolk State of Talladega.
Norfolk State.
So Mike has Prairie View versus Jackson State, 1 versus 5. He has a 6-2 matchup in that Sweet 16. Bowie State over Norfolk State. Running it out, let's do this real quick so we don't take up a lot of time. Who do you have coming out of this region in terms of playing in the Elite 8? First, give me your Elite 8, and then who comes out of that region. Starting with you, Mike. Who plays in the Elite 8 game?
Well, you can't go. You got to go with Prairie View as number 1. You got to go with North Carolina Central. They'll make it all the way. You got to go with.
No, we'll get in that other region. You have this one would be setting up with Prairie View, Jackson State. You got Prairie View coming out, and then you have Virginia State, Norfolk State. I mean, you had Bowie State, Norfolk State. Who do you have coming out of that matchup?
Between Bowie State and Norfolk State.
Yeah.
You got to go with Norfolk State on that one.
So yeah, Prairie View, Norfolk State matchup in the Elite 8. Who have you coming out to the Final Four?
I got Prairie View coming out.
All right, no problem. This is where it gets interesting, Charles. Prairie View Jackson State rematch. Prairie View got it done twice, but it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a year. Obviously, that second game was close early, ended in a little tussle. They were waiting to play as the semifinals in the SWAC going to Birmingham, not to be. But in this lineup, they get to play in this matchup. So we found a way to get that game. What is the virtual matchup you have, Prairie View Jackson State? Who you have coming out, Charles?
Very hard to beat a team 3 times in a season, but I'm going to have to lean towards Prairie View in terms of their physicality against Jackson State. I've been impressed with both times I've watched them play Jackson State this past season, and they just seem to get it done on the boards.
Man, I have much respect for Charles. I thought since it was fantasy, he was going to let it fly, but he is a man of the numbers, and he gave it like he saw it. So with that, obviously, you have the Virginia State-Norfolk State matchup. This is a rivalry in a lot of ways. I know it's Division I, Division II, goes back to the CIAA days. They played a non-conference game. Virginia State upset Norfolk State about 2 years ago. Now we got it on hardwood. What are your thoughts in terms of this one?
That one was a tough one. And I'm gonna lean. It's easy to go with Norfolk State on that one, but I like the way Virginia State plays basketball, and I could see that upset.
No problem. Give you what I got. I had Prairie View coming out of the Dillard game, Fayetteville State over Jackson State, my first major upset. I had Virginia State over Virginia State over Bowie State, Norfolk State over Talladega. I was like you, Charles. I saw the upset and I called it. I said Virginia State upsets Norfolk State as the 3 seed, so you have a number 1 versus Virginia State, and so I have Prairie View beating up on Virginia State coming out of the Clarence Big House game. Next one is in terms of the matchup that will face Big House game. In this case, we all said Prairie View coming out as the Jerry Johnson region, where you have North Carolina A&T versus number 8 Voorhees, a 4-5 matchup that catches Bethune-Cookman West Virginia State. The 6-3 matchup has Harris Stowe versus Johnson C. Smith, and a 2-7 with Texas Southern versus Clark Atlanta out of the SIAC. Starting with you, Charles. North Carolina A&T versus Voorhees. Any problem there?
No problem whatsoever. Going with the Aggies on that one.
4-5 matchup. West Virginia State, Bethune-Cookman. Who do you see coming out?
I like Quatrell Pope and the Bethune-Cookman Wildcats.
Yeah, Defensive Player of the Year of the MEAC. Interesting call. 3-6, Harris Stowe versus Johnson C. Smith. Who you pulling?
I'm going to go with the CIAA team. I like the way they play basketball on the East Coast. So let's go with Johnson C. Smith on that one.
No problem. And finally, Texas Southern versus Clark Atlanta. Anything you got going on there?
Ooh, I know Texas Southern on that one. I like Texas Southern. Yeah.
You tried to surprise us there maybe. All right, go ahead. Mike, North Carolina A&T and Voorhees.
Now you got to go with the Aggies as well. I agree.
Bethune-Cookman, West Virginia State.
Bethune.
6-3 Harris Stowe versus Johnson C. Smith.
That was Harris Stowe go again. I'm sorry, you got a little fuzzy.
Harris Stowe versus Johnson C. Smith. 6-3.
I'm gonna go Johnson C. Smith.
And finally, the 7-2 or 2-7 matchup with Texas Southern and Clark Atlanta.
Oh, that's Texas Southern. Come on, 20-14 overall, 14-4 in the conference.
Hey, this was my upset bracket, so I saw some upsets happen here. Nothing really big in terms of the 1-2 seeds, but the other ones got a little exciting. I had North Carolina A&T over Voorhees, but I have West Virginia State over Bethune-Cookman. Surprise of the day. I had Harris Stowe beating up Johnson C. Smith, and Clark Atlanta. Texas Southern, I had Texas Southern over Clark Atlanta. So my 1-2 matchup was North Carolina A&T, Texas Southern. I had Texas Southern upsetting number 1 seed North Carolina A&T, getting it done. So a Final Four matchup that goes back to Texas and Atlanta, if you would, with Prairie View versus Texas Southern for a rubber match as they split earlier this year. Should be interesting. We saw what happened in the tournament last year, but that's how I call it. Mike, who do you have coming out of this region?
I actually would have had it the same way with Texas Southern coming out on top.
Wow.
Yep.
No problem. Charles, who you got coming out of this region?
North Carolina A&T.
Okay. So we got two number 1 seeds coming out the region to face each other in Atlanta. For Charles, that's Prairie View, North Carolina A&T. For Mike, we have a bit of an upset. We have Prairie View, Texas Southern, which is the same as I picked. Flipping the board on the other side with John McClendon. Out of this region, you have North Carolina Central, the number 2 overall seed, versus number 8 Morehouse out of the SIAC. 4-5 matchup features Xavier over Alcorn State. 6-3 is Stillman versus Miles. That's previously SIAC matchup. Stillman now at the NIA level. Miles still in the SIAC Division 2. And then 7-2 matchup with Albany State, Tennessee State. Let me start with Mike. Mike, what is your thoughts about, let's start at the bottom with the 2 versus 7, Tennessee State and Albany State. Who do you have coming up? And as you like to say, all boo.
Oh, Manny. I got Tennessee State on that one.
Gotcha. What about Stillman, Miles 6-3 matchup?
Miles.
4-5 matchup with Xavier and Alcorn State. Who do you have coming out of there?
Woo!
Yeah. This is where it gets a little fun.
Oh. My gut would tell me I would go actually with Xavier on that one.
No problem. I might surprise you with something. It sounds like can't wait to get to Charles and see his thought. Final one, Mike. North Carolina Central and Morehouse, number 1 seed. Any problem for the Eagles of North Carolina Central?
No problem for the Eagles.
No problem. Going straight to Charles. Let's start at the top since we can get you to that Xavier. I like the way you were saying, hey, wait a minute. North Carolina Central, Morehouse, any problem there?
No problem. Going with North Carolina Central.
4-5 matchup, Xavier and Alcorn State. What do you say?
Alcorn is so enigmatic. You know when they're on, Dr. Will, they're on. They can shoot the lights out.
Yes.
I'm going Alcorn on that one.
I thought you were going to give way to sticking to those Braves down there. But credit to you again. You do the numbers. You do it right. 6-3 Stillman versus Miles. I think this is a fascinating matchup. It's also in Birmingham. Miles get the benefit of being home in this region. I don't know how that happened from the people that were picking the locations, but it is what it is. It is just fantasy. You get this matchup. They haven't played since Stillman left SIAC Division 2, so this should be fascinating with a lot of people watching this matchup. Mike, what do you think? Charles, what do you say with Stillman and Miles?
I got to go with Miles Bears on that. I like Miles as a team, and their coach, he gets it done year in, year out. So.
Great point. Albany State, Tennessee State. Who you have here?
Got to go with the Tennessee State Tigers.
No problem. My breakdown for this region had one upset, but that was really it. I had North Carolina Central, Morehouse, North Carolina Central. I did have the upset like Mike. I had Xavier over Alcorn coming outside a 1-4 matchup there. Miles versus Tennessee State coming out of there. And then in the Miles-Tennessee State matchup, I have Tennessee State getting it done against Miles. I think it was closer than people think. North Carolina Central versus Xavier. So Central gets it done as the number 1 seed. And then you get a matchup everybody would love in the Elite 8 with North Carolina Central and Tennessee State. Man, you talking about going back. John McClendon coached both of these schools. 2 basketball-heavy programs historically in terms of getting it done. North Carolina Central winning a national NCAA Division II coach. Oddly enough, they did it with Coach Mouton when he was a player there. Tennessee State under legendary coach John McClendon winning 3 straight NAIA national championships. First team to win 3 championships. Boy, if you can get this type of game, in fact, they need to play on the regular season anyway. This needs to be a home matchup.
Agreed.
HBCU fans would want to see it, but for me, I got North Carolina Central getting it done. It's hard for me to believe while Tennessee State has a lot of talent. That 500 record in OVC just throws me. I have to give the edge to Coach Mouton. I think he's an excellent coach. He'd find a way to get it done. And Central comes out of this region. Let me go back to you, Mike. Who do you have coming out of this region?
I have the Eagles coming out.
Good deal. So you have the Eagles coming out over Miles of Tennessee State. You want to sneak and tell us something there?
I say again, I'm sorry.
When you had, you said North Carolina Central coming out of the region, that means they would have played either Miles or Tennessee State. Who did you have a matchup in that Elite Eight? Who did North Carolina Central beat?
I had them matching up, believe it or not, against Miles.
Ah, you had an upset of Tennessee State. You didn't let Tennessee State get out of it.
I have two upsets in this region. I have Xavier and then I have Miles.
Nice. Like it. Charles, what do you say? Who comes out of this region and what were your matchups in terms of the Elite Eight in that matchup?
North Carolina Central. And who's Miles playing again? They matched up against Tennessee State?
Yeah, I had the 3-2 matchup with Miles versus Tennessee State, yes. I like when he pauses instead of.
I'm rushing. I'm like trying to think of the statistical analysis, but just my gut gives Tennessee State the edge on that.
No problem. So you got Tennessee State coming out over Miles and North Carolina Central. Tennessee State, who you have coming out of the region?
I am going to go with the Carolina Central Eagles.
All right. Everybody has all those number one seeds, or at least Charles has all 3 number one seeds. Obviously, we have 2 number one seeds with 1 number 2 seeds with North Carolina Central coming out getting it done. Final region, Ben Joe region, you have a number 1 versus number 8, Southern versus Central, a 4-5 Virginia Union versus Morgan State, a 6-3 matchup with Tougaloo versus Winston-Salem State, Gulf Coast Athletic Conference over versus CIAA, and then you have more interesting usually on the football field, but a lot of history between these schools. Tuskegee as a 7 seed versus Hampton, number 2 seed. Obviously, Booker T. Washington founder of Tuskegee getting it done coming out of Hampton as one of their lauded graduates. What are your thoughts? Let me start back with you, Charles, as we just finished up. Let's start at the top again. Southern versus number 8. Although you had some question about Southern being in this number 1 seed. Are they going to make it out of this region? Well, let's start first with that Southern versus 8 Central State. Charles, what are your thoughts on that matchup?
Yes, I do have Southern over Central State.
4-5 Virginia Union versus Morgan State. Yeah, Morgan State was another one of those enigmatic teams, like you said about Tennessee State. They just get in the tournament for some people. You see they're raised as a 5 seed, so there's some question there. They are Division I, so people like their power. But Virginia Union is talented. Virginia Union is not scared of anybody. What are your thoughts on this 4-5 matchup? What you say, Charles?
And for that reason, I like Virginia Union. I will throw their athletes up against my Division I counterparts. So I like that team. So we're going to go Virginia Union on that.
No problem. Yep. You explained it well. 6-3 matchup, Tougaloo versus Winston-Salem State. You know a lot about Tougaloo, Charles. What you say here? You've actually had me look a little hard about this one.
I do, and I really like Tougaloo in that because I know Lewis Phillips. He can throw waves of guys at you. He's going to always have 1 or 2 scores, so don't count out the Bulldogs in that one.
No problem. Then you have a 7-2 matchup, Tuskegee and Hampton. Anything here?
I'm going to go Hampton on that one.
No problem. Mike, let me jump right to you. Final region again, Ben Jobe. 1 versus 8, Southern Central State.
Southern.
4-5, Virginia Union, Morgan State. You shook your head. You shook your head. I thought you were going to say it. You was like, yep, I'm feeling you, Charles. I feel you. 6-3. Go ahead.
Yeah, Virginia Union versus Morgan State. Virginia Union has some players. Morgan State is number 5 in the MEAC. Their play was sporadic. So I'm going with Virginia Union.
No doubt there. Great point you make. 6 versus 3. Tougaloo, Winston-Salem State. Gulf Coast Athletic Conference versus CIAA. What do you have?
That's the one I scratched my head, but my gut tells me Ladarius Woods and Tougaloo will come out on that one.
Tuskegee versus Hampton, Mike?
Hampton.
All right. This is the one where I had fun with. It is fun to see. I blew up this bracket, if you would. all upsets up and down the chart. Let me start at the bottom to give you those upsets. 7 versus 2, Tuskegee Hampton. I had Tuskegee getting it done, closing the door on Howard's career. I had an upset 7 over 2, yes. Tougaloo over 16.
Were you drinking when you picked that?
No, but it's about time for that as we get ready to close out the last week there. So I am ready for a drink. I know you're not talking as everybody can't see you on the screen. I can, but I won't tell it on you.
Tuskegee. Oh, you hear that glass of water I have.
Yeah, it shows darkly colored, but yes, I guess so. Prune juice, huh? Tuskegee versus Hampton. I had Tuskegee getting it done. That 7C shocks the world. Biggest upset of the tournament I had. 6 versus 3. Charles had taught me a lot about Tougaloo and found a way to get it done. So when you talk about a team offensively put up 84 points and Winston-Salem team, they can't put up very many points at 69 defensively. They do shut some teams down, but I felt Charles, and I had Tougaloo coming out of that. So my sweet team features a 6-7 matchup. Wow. Then another upset I had at the 4-5 spot, I had Virginia Union. I had Morgan State over Virginia Union. Slight upset there. Opposite of what you said, but I had Southern getting it done. And while Tougaloo gets by Tuskegee, they can't get it over Southern. Defensive too much for Southern. So I have Southern finding a way out of this region to get to Atlanta as the number 1 seed. Mike, who comes out of this region? What was your elite matchup in terms of that? You had Hampton versus Tougaloo. Who do you?
I actually had it where I believe if it's seated the way you do it, I think Southern would end up playing Tougaloo. And I had Southern coming out.
All right. Charles, who you have coming out of this region? You had that Southern versus Virginia Union. You had Tougaloo versus Hampton. Who do you have in your Elite 8?
You know what? I'm going to go fantasy upset on this, and I think Tougaloo is going to pick somebody off. So even though they didn't win the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference this past season, Thomas Billis is one of those coaches. He gets teams up when they're supposed to be up, and I got Tougaloo picking off. I believe
Hampton.
Yep. Hampton. I got Tougaloo picking off Hampton.
So you have a Hampton in the Elite 8, Southern over Virginia Union, or Virginia Union surprises the world?
Yeah. Heck no. Let's go Southern on that one.
You can't tell a man how to pick. Southern versus...
It took me a second to think about it.
He talked you off that ledge. I was going to let you have it. So you have Southern versus Tougaloo. Who you have coming out and making it to Atlanta?
Southern.
No problem. So Charles has all number 1 picks coming out. He has Prairie View, North Carolina A&T, facing off in the Final Four semifinal matchup, and then you have North Carolina Central versus Southern. While Mike has a Prairie View A&M Texas Southern rematch like myself, and then you have Southern versus North Carolina Central in that matchup. We'll leave it there for everybody. Any final thoughts you have as we start to get ready to close it out?
Yeah, one quick final thought, and I want to say definitely our prayers go out to the family of Fred Curley, of Harlem Globetrotter legend. Of course, he's a Johnson C. Smith alumnus, but he passed away last week, and he passed away at the age of 77. And that was a story first reported by HBCU Game Day, so kudos to Stephen Gates and those guys over there. But a fan favorite for a lot of years in Curly Neal.
Yeah. Mike, any final thoughts from you?
No, I couldn't have said it any better. Thanks, GB, for bringing up. I actually had a chance to see him twice playing with the Globetrotters, so it was something fun to watch. So, prayers and thoughts go out to he and his family as they get over this moment of grieving.
No doubt about it. Great point you make there. As we start to close out, we want to do one final thing is if we can get it done in a lot of ways. Let me see if I can bring it on.
I think we're about to have technical difficulties now.
Say, Mike, watch yourself, man. Watch yourself. I told you how you keep coming along with these steaks, man. You're going to get yourself in trouble, man. I thought you like those steaks that I...
What up, world? It's your boy, Rob Calloway, host of the HBCU Report. And right now, you're inside the HBCU Sports Lab with my guy. All hail the king of HBCU Sports.
I didn't mean to speak it into existence. You still there, Doc?
Say, man, don't be interrupting my segment and all that. Obviously, we right here as we get it done. Boy, I tell you, these folks here find a way just to put you under the bridge and all kinds of things. As we start to sign off, this is Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, a radio show with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Glad you all tuned for us. Another week of giving you HBCU news of the day. Hope you enjoyed this show with the updates of what's going on with the NCAA and HBCU sports news of the day, including the BCSN Fantasy 2020 BCN Men's Fantasy Basketball Tournament. You saw our picks. Get out there and pick your picks. NCAA didn't drop a poll, which we can understand why in terms of brackets, but we got you a bracket. Let me know who you have coming out and getting it done. We picked our final 4 teams. We'll bring you the final list next week and give you our final thoughts in terms of who's crowned champion of our 2020 BCSN Men's Fantasy Basketball Tournament, brought to you by BCSN. You can listen to the whole show or the show regularly with BCN Sports Rap with Brian and AD. Go to BCSN.com. You can check out the show. They also on Facebook and platform. With that, that'll do it for us. Dr. Kenyatta Cavil in regards to Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. All right, fellas.
Have a good one, Doc. All right, have a good one, Doc. All right, CB, catch you later.
Take care.
Catch you later, Mike.
As you know, I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. As we come to close, we hope you enjoyed our show and our lecture today. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU radio show with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday right here from 6 to 7, KCOH 1230 AM, Houston, Texas. And we will be back on air live quick. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on DrKenyattaCavil on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Course lecture dismissed.